Hey, were you here for page 141? About the child who's crying and all that? You weren't here for that, eh?
No, I did.
You were here for that, yeah. When we spoke about that. Okay, so Reb Shlomo is talking about love before creation and love after creation, meaning to say that when Hashem created the world, it says, God created the world, that His love caused Him to create the world so that there should be someone to receive His love, right? And love after creation is basically when you love, something arouses you to love, right? Whatever it may be, you see someone in need or whatever it is, and your compassion is aroused. That's love after creation. You understand? Like so he says that when it comes to healing, right? When it comes to healing, it has to be, you can't heal with the love of after creation. It has to be the healing of love before creation. And the last thing we learned was that when the child is crying, for example, and an adult goes over to the child and says, "Why are you crying?" He says, "My father gave me a patch." "Why did he give you a patch?" He told me not to play with the ball in the house, and I broke something. And the adult says, "You deserve it, right?" So Shlomo says, that's not the time to teach him that lesson. Right now, the child is crying. He needs to know that he's loved anyway. In other words, and this goes back to the Eitz Hadas and Eitz Chaim, to the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. The tree of knowledge is Eitz Hadas Tov Ra. You understand? Everything is according to what you did. This, you're gonna get this. It's just din. You understand? It's all conditional. Everything is conditional. Whereas the love before creation is an infinite love. It is not dependent on what you did, what you didn't do. It's because Hashem loves you. And that needs to be healed because, as the way Reb Shlomo put it, and Nebuch, everybody was talking about the speech of one of the Satmar Rebbe's last Thursday night and Friday. And like people were like, couldn't believe some of the things that he said. You heard about it? Okay, so we don't need to repeat it. If you heard about it? Okay. Anyway. So good. So you look at it. You'll check it out after. It's all over the place. But in any case, basically it was like saying, this happened to the three boys because of something else, something stupid, whatever. Okay. And wrong line. Okay.
So where should we look if we want to see what he said? All right.
Okay. So because Reb Shlomo said that that it happens often that when you hear that when people hear that somebody is sick, So some people say, "Oh, I understand. They deserved it," Chas v'sholem. So he says that means, or there are some people who think that they understand why the Holocaust happened. So he says when people are like that, he says basically they have murder in their heart. It's like they're it's almost as if they were to say, even though they didn't actually murder anyone, but it's like saying that if I would have the power, I would do this to you for this, right? So in other words, so what is it that you have in your heart? So what you have in your heart is everything after creation, right? In other words, where's the love from before creation? And anybody who believes in Tshuva has to believe in the love before creation, because if not, why should Hashem forgive? Right? Right, and then we brought in the whole thing with the 10 days, right, and and Bereshis, right? We spoke about that. Remember? Remember we spoke about that. That the 10 utterances of creation correspond to the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, right? And that Yom Kippur corresponds with Bereshis. Okay, fine. Did you say over the thing about Matzah? Yeah, by the roads.
I didn't say like out loud on the table, but
Yeah. Okay. But when I wrote this was mamish a gift, it was a gift I received. Okay. We've got a healer here. What's your first name? Shana. Shana is actually a healer, right? I don't know if you do this kind of healing over here of hands-on healing, but anyway, the power to heal was touching. מכאן אני רוצה לדבר על כוח הריפוי שיש בידיים. I want to talk about the power of healing that is available, that is in one's hands. לכאורה הידיים מוגבלות. You would in the yeshivish world they pronounce it l'chayre. You ever hear the word l'chayre? It's really the cha'ura, right? The cha'ura, the way I translate it, is at first light. In other words, at first light, in other words, when things are not yet totally clear, but it would seem to be that way. Hayadayim mugbalot, hands are limited. L'chen kol ma shenisayim hayadayim yeh gam ken mugbal. So then, therefore, everything that you do with your hands, of course, would also be limited. But it's not really true. You have the power in your hands to deliver something, to transmit something infinite. L'mashal, אם אני אומר למישהו אני אוהב אותך, to tell somebody I love you, זה מוגבל, כי דיבורים הם מוגבלים, because words are limited. אבל אם אני מחזיק את ידו ואני אומר לו שאני אוהב אותו, but if I'm holding the person's hand and I tell them I love them, זה אין סופי, that already has an infinite quality.
How are the two statements different? They seem alike.
But when I'm holding his hand,
You're holding
So when you
somebody's
touch
hand.
somebody, it can be more personal. So you touch them and say I love you, and then she look into their eyes and it's a much more deeper thing. Like,
yeah, but it's
I
not.
see.
Yeah.
Yemani Omer.
Right,
And-
if
and
it's
the
just
only-
speaking versus speaking and holding the person's hand, right? Okay. So, it's quite a few years ago already, but Hanan and Gula? They live in Tekoa. He's a musician, and she's a doula. Anyway, so they got married at this place up on Harris 18. There's a little Jewish settlement up there. She was your doula? Now you remember? Okay. And and her father was working for Bibi was prime minister at the time also, and her father was working there with Bibi. Anyway, Bibi came to the wedding, Bibi Netanyahu. And that hall, didn't have any concrete walls yet. It was just sort of like a tent. There's a Jewish enclave there. Ras Al Amud, I think they call it. You heard about it? You know what I'm talking about? It's up on Har HaZeitim. So he actually showed up during the middle of the chuppah. I tried to call him up to come and do a bracha, but he didn't want to. In any case, after the chuppah, he went and he sat down at a table in the middle of the hall. I guess that was the most secure place, like, not to be like near the edges. And as it happened, he sat down at the table that Judy and I were supposed to sit at. And the security people were around him, and so I come over to the table, and the guy says, "What do you want here?" So I showed him my place card. I said, I'm sitting at this table. So in the meantime, people are coming over, like, shaking his hand, shaking his hand. So I wanted to see, I wanted to test his sensitivity, and I know a little bit about how to sort of put energy through my hand. And I wanted to see if after all those hands that he's shaking, if he's going to notice a difference. Because most of the people who were just shaking their hands, he wasn't even looking at anything, right? So I put my hand out, and he takes my hand, and all of a sudden he turns around. Like, he still had that sensitivity, Anyway, the point is that you can send energy through your hands. It's a fact, right? Some people, you shake their hands, and you can't wait to get it back, and you count your fingers to make sure that you got all your fingers back too, that they didn't take anything up, and so on, right? And some people, you shake their hands, and it feels like, I wouldn't mind holding this person's hand forever, right? So even though the hands are actually limited, there's something that can be transmitted through the hands that are of an infinite quality. That's what Reb Shlomo is saying, right? Then he says, the Gemara אומרת, שהקדוש ברוך הוא ברא את העולם עם הידיים שלו. That God, the Gemara says that God made the world, created the world with his hands. Okay, there's no footnote here. I don't know where that Gemara is. But in any case, since it says in the story of creation, it uses the word vayas, God made. So vayas is making things, is usually with the hands, right? So he says shalosh negiyot, three different types of touching. Yesh yadayim shel lifnei habriya v'yesh yadayim shel acharei habriya. There are hands from before creation, and there are hands after creation. Hayadayim shel lifnei habriya hein lo yadayim shel gvul. The hands of before creation are unlimited. Hein b'darga gvoha kol kach shehara eino nogei Hashem klal. These hands can reach somewhere that evil doesn't reach there. L'mashal, for example, let's say I'm getting engaged with a woman, and I think that I really love her a lot, and then somebody comes and tells me, she's not such a great find, and I decide as a result of that, what I was told, I'm not going to see her anymore. The problem is not that she's not good. The problem is that I don't love her enough. Right? If I would love her enough, and somebody would tell me she's not very good, I would say I don't care. Because my love for her is so high that so what she's doing doesn't reach that. It doesn't affect that. Yes.
So that's a beautiful. I had this beautiful thought, but I don't fully agree with it. Because I feel like the reason why there's sometimes there are divorces is people other people around you see something that's not okay, and people tell you, and you're like, no, it's good, it's okay. And then after marriage, you realize it wasn't actually okay, but you're so in love or in lust, whatever it is, that let it slide because you love him so much.
Right.
That's actually what
You're-
you shouldn't.
Right, but what you're talking about again is love after creation. In other words, the expression in English that love is blinding, right? So that kind of love is a little bit more like infatuation. You know, that you're infatuated with the person, you just don't see anything, right? But there is a possibility of loving somebody so much, and you actually do see. Somebody tells you, like, like she's got a problem or he's got a problem, and you're aware of it. And you say, yes, I recognize, but the love that I have is beyond that, right? In other words, it's not like you don't see the problem. Understand? It's one thing that that you don't see the problem, and then you realize that oh, you just didn't see it. But here he's talking about that you're recognizing that this person is not perfect, but you love her so much, or you love him so much, it doesn't matter. It's not that it doesn't matter, but it's not going to cause you to break off the relationship, right? Right, so again, that last paragraph. אם הייתי אוהב אותה מספיק ומישהו היה מספר לי שהיא לא טובה, הייתי אומר, לא אכפת לי, לא love her enough. And someone tells me that she's not very good, I would say I don't care. בגלל שהאהבה שלי אליה כל כך גבוהה, מעשיה לא מגיעים לשם, because my love for her is so high that what she does doesn't affect the love. לא שלא אכפת לי ממעשיה, right? So he's making it clear here. It's not that what she does doesn't make a difference to me, אלא שמעשיה לא משפיעים על האהבה שלי אליה. But rather, what she's doing doesn't influence my love for her. יש עוד בחינת ידיים. So that's one level, right? That's one level of the hands reaching further. Right, reaching further than in other words, reaching to the place where something negative doesn't affect it. Then he says, then there's another level, and that is V'hi Yadayim Shel Mashiach. That's Mashiach hands. Now, what's the basis for saying something like this? He right away quotes a pasuk, he quotes a verse. כתוב על בית המקדש השלישי, says concerning the third base of Mikdash, he says, Mikdash Hashem koinenu yadecha. The sanctuary of God, your hands are establishing it. So what does that mean? Page 143. Beit HaMikdash HaRishon v'Hasheni nivnu al yadeinu. The first Beit HaMikdash and the second were built by our hands. Beit HaMikdash HaShlishi yibaneh b'meira rak im hayadayim shel Hashem. The third Beit HaMikdash is going to be built by God's hands. Hayadayim ha'elu gvohot od yoter mehayadayim shel lifnei habriyah. These hands that will be building the third Beit HaMikdash are even a higher manifestation of God, even higher than what was before creation. Okay?
Does that mean that we're not building? I know that like man was supposed to be building the Beit HaMikdash.
The third one?
Yeah, and the Mashiach puts in the last part.
Could be, but the point is that for sure the completion of the building is going to be totally dependent on Hashem. Okay?
But to me, it's sort of, it could be interpreted or misinterpreted that like we don't really, it's gonna come, we don't really need to do anything.
It's not that we don't need to do anything, but we according to our tradition, we cannot go and say, okay, we hired a kablan and we're doing it on our own. After the destruction of the second Beit HaMikdash, basically our ancestors took 3 oaths, and one of them was that we weren't going to try to rebuild it by force, right? And the whole machlokes between, for example, between Satmar and the Zionists is that one of the oaths that we took was Shelo Yalu B'Chuma, that we wouldn't come back to Eretz Yisrael by force. There's a book called the Eim HaBanim Smecha. Have you seen that book? It was by this Haredi Rav from before the war, who was like a very, very anti-Zionist, Rav Teichtal. And then after the war, he changed his opinion. But basically, he, those who say that we were allowed to come back by forces, because they say because the Goyim broke the part of the oath that they were supposed to keep too, and that was that they were not allowed to treat us with such cruelty as they've done throughout history. So it's a Gemara in Ksubas, I believe, and once looked it up. In any case, so the one side of the argument is we were supposed to wait for Mashiach to bring us back, and the other side of the argument was that we couldn't wait anymore because so much suffering was going on. Right? In any case, but there is a common understanding that it ain't going to be like the Israeli government that's going to rebuild the third Beis Hamikdash, right? That for sure it has to be Mashiach, right? To get with Hashem. So he says, okay, so he's got three stages over here, three levels. One is the limitation of hands in this world. You can only do so much with your hands. And then there's a stage which is you can transmit something that's got the quality of the infinite, like the hands of before creation, right? In other words, in the example that he gave for that, meaning to say that you can transmit a love that is before creation. You can transmit something that is more powerful than what the other person may have done or not done. And then there's another level, and that's the third one, is that it's even higher than the hands of before creation. So he's going to explain here. He says, sometimes you heal a person, just your love for them starts to generate their healing. But it takes time. It's the aspect of hands before creation. In other words, God creates the world with this love of before creation, but still it took 6 days for the world to be built. Instead, it takes time. Mashiach hands, okay, he says that's the kind of love that the person gets healed in a moment. The hands of before creation are infinite, in other words, they're not totally infinite, right? It takes time. Even in infinity, there's different types of infinity, by the way. Okay. For example, I once read, in any given line, there's an infinite amount of points in the line, right? But still, the line itself is not infinite, right? So the hands of before creation takes time. It took 6 days to make the heaven and earth. But the hands that are going to build the Beis Hamikdash is going to be in one instant. When you love someone, and you're holding their hands, the person can feel if they're hands of after creation, or they can feel if they're hands of before creation, or you can also feel that possibly that is the hands of even the Mashiach hands. Okay, so the fact is that there are I don't know if this how widespread it is, but there are definitely hospitals that do allow people to bring in healers who lay their hands on. You know, they and there's definitely a power of healing in hands. What Reb Shlomo is saying is that there's a lot more that we can do than you may have known. There's a lot more good that you could do in helping people and making and healing people, for sure, a lot more than Western medicine claims. Like, and that can be done. And there's no question about it. Some people, like, and I'm sure that, with children, like sometimes if a child has a fever or whatever it is, it's possible to take away their fever with touch. But you got to know what you're doing, and you got to be careful because you might get it yourself. Okay. So he's gone from speaking about love before creation and love after creation, and he's related it now to the hands, right? And he's putting it into a very practical reality. Like, in other words, love is a pretty elusive word, but when he's talking about hands and transmission of loving energy through the hands, you can relate to that a little bit better. So he says, Yiradim v'litufim, children and, what do you call that, a stroke? Like, when you stroke a child's cheek, right? So Yiradim מאוד קשורים עם ידיים. Children are very, very connected with hands. הם נולדו בתוך ידיים. They were born into someone's hands. יש ילדים שגדלים עם ידיים של לפני הבריאה. יש שגדלים עם הידיים של משיח. There are children who grow up with hands of before creation. There are children who grow up with hands of Mashiach. לפעמים ילדה קטנה בוכה, sometimes a little girl is crying, ואתה מלטף אותה על ראשה, you give her a little pat on the head, וזה לא עוזר, and it doesn't help. היא ממשיכה לבכות. She keeps on crying. ולפעמים אתה מלטף אותה, and sometimes you give her a pat, והיא פתאום מפסיקה לבכות, מחייכת אליך, and she stops crying, and she's smiling. זה בחינת הידיים של משיח. In other words, the situation is with the girl is the same. It's just that it's the way you gave her the pat. That's what makes all the difference, right? And it's a lolokech zman. Sometimes just like one little pat, and the child has already stopped crying, and it doesn't take time, and so on. Okay, so what's that about? So he says on page 144. Tam ha'in sof, a taste of the infinite. Yeshnam anashim shelo ta'amu et tam ha'in sof. I got to tell you this story. There's a Hasidic Rebbe in New York, the cont'd Rebbe. So his father, Reb Shlomo, I think I told you a story about him before Pesach. He was a Holocaust survivor, and he actually lived on Eastern Parkway when he first came to New York, apparently. And he did a tremendous amount of work helping survivors. So I didn't know much about him, but when I was a kid in Montreal, so in the neighborhood that we lived, there was a Jewish school across the street from our house. And sometimes when, like Lubavitch didn't have a hall, Satmar didn't have a hall, but this school had a gymnasium, so sometimes when there would be like a Rebbe from out of town or whatever it was, and they wanted to have a tish, they would use this place. So I was like 10 years old, and I heard of this cont'd Rebbe's across the street. I don't know what made me go, but whatever it was, I decided to go into the tish, and he's giving out shiraim. And there was a whole line of people. So I'm standing in line, to get shiraim, and the way he was giving shiraim was he had eaten a plate of fish or whatever it was, and as everybody came by, he gave them a piece of challah that he wiped on the plate, and so on. And I'm standing in line, and I see that maybe there's 10, 15 people in front of me, and the plate is already clean. But people are still going, and he's still taking the piece of challah and he's wiping it on the plate, you know. And like mamish, the plate is clean. Like, you know, you couldn't have washed it any cleaner, right? And I get up to him and he takes the piece of challah and he wipes the plate clean, okay? And I ate it, and I'm telling you, you might want to tell me it's my imagination. I don't care what you're going to say. I tasted his whole meal in that piece of challah. You know, not only that, like Imam should have a clear memory of his face, and even though it was the only time I ever saw him. You know. In any case, years later, like I read this story about somehow during the war, some of his chassidim managed to get hold of a significant quantity of flour before Pesach, and they somehow managed to make an oven, a secret oven, and they baked matzah for Pesach, and the word went out. God bless you. The word went out that on a certain date, the Skulen Rebbe is going to be handing out matzah, giving 3 matzahs to everybody, so they should have for the Seder. Anyway, one of the Vishnitzer children, one of the Vishnitzer Rebbe's was in hiding somewhere like about 10, 15, 20 kilometers away, whatever it was, and he sends his son to go and get matzah. And he tells his son, listen, the Rebbe is giving everybody 3 matzahs, and I want you to tell him who you are, and that I sent you, and that my father, the Gzerat Kibud Av, insisted that to honor him, I have to bring home 6 matzahs. So his son goes, and there's a big line of people, and he finally is in front of the Skulener Rebbe, and he tells him, I'm so-and-so, son of the Vishnitzer, da-da-da-da. And he hands him 3 matzahs, and he says, my father wants 6 matzahs, and he ordered me, with the authority of Kabed Avicha, honor your father, I have to come home with 6 matzahs. The Skulener Rebbe looks out at the line, and the line is still huge, and he says, I can't give you 6 matzahs. There's all these people here. I can't give you 6 matzahs. He says, but my father commanded me that I have to bring home 6 matzahs. So he sighed and he gave him 3 more matzahs. Okay. You got to hear the end of the story later. Erev Pesach, the Vishnitzer sends his son back to the Skulener Rebbe. He says, my father wants to know if you have any more matzah. And the Skulener Rebbe says, I don't even have a single matzah for myself. And he takes out a package, and he says, my father sent you matzah. You've heard the story before? He says, my father sent you 3 matzahs. Understand? His father knew that his Skulener Rebbe was going to give away every single matzah that he had. He wasn't going to keep any for himself. That's the kind of person he was. Okay, so why am I connecting these 2 stories? You know, when I heard the second story, you realize that this is a person of a whole different caliber, right? This is a person of a whole different caliber. And if you tell me that I actually, you know, when I say I actually tasted his whole meal that he had eaten in that piece of challah that he wiped on a dry plate, I'm not surprised anymore. I'm not surprised. I mean, you know, like it was something like really extraordinary, and that's what Shlomo was talking about. Okay, so in other words, there's levels of tuning into something that we're not normally familiar with, but they are definitely possible. So he says on page 144, he says, Yeshnam anashim shelo ta'amu atam ha'ensof. There are people who never tasted anything infinite. Mihem anashim habodedim v'hashvurim. Who are the broken and lonely people? Anashim shelo ta'amu et atam shel ha'ensof. People who never tasted anything of the infinite. יש אנשים שאין להם את האין סוף. Then there are people who don't have a taste of the infinite, אבל פעם בחיים שלהם, but once in their life, גוואלד, הם טעמו מה זה אין סוף. But once in their life, they actually did get to have a taste. למשל, for example, אני אוהב את אשתי ואני קונה לה בית בניו יורק. ואני קונה לה בית בפריז. ואני קונה לה בית בארץ ישראל. I love my wife a lot. I buy her a house in New York, and I buy her a house in Paris, and I buy her a house in Israel. אני נותן לה הרבה דברים גדולים כל הזמן, and I'm also giving her some like big things all the time, big gifts. פעם אחת התפללתי ליד הכותל, but then once I was davening at the הכותל, ואבן קטנה אחת מאבני הכותל נפלה עליי, and a little stone fell off the wall on me. הרמתי אותה, and I picked it up, והבאתי אותה לאשתי, and I gave it to my wife. זה אין סופי. זה עמוק יותר מכל הדברים הגדולים. That's much deeper. That's infinite. It's much deeper than all the big things that I've given her. Right? You guys follow that? Chaya, you get that? No? Well, he's giving a simple. I mean, he's giving a fancy example, but a very simple example. You've had birthday parties, I imagine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people bring all kinds of gifts, right? So what makes a gift special is not necessarily the size of the box and how much they spent on the gift, etc., right? And sometimes the same person can give you like a big gift, and then the next day they give you just something small, right? And that little small thing could mean a lot more than the big gift that they gave you, all the big gifts they gave you until now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying, like, the example that he gives is like, like, because he's so connected with the kotel, right? So when he gives you that little stone, it's much more infinite than all the houses that he bought her, because he's not so connected with the houses, right? The houses don't mean the same thing to him as a little pebble of the kotel. Okay? אפשר לתת לילד הרבה דברים, אבל גוואלד מה שהילד צריך זה האין סוף. You can give children a lot of things, but what children really need is the ein sof. And it's pretty amazing, I remember when I was a kid, and it was in the last century, what did we have for toys? We had a rubber ball, had a pair of skates and a hockey stick. That was it. Maybe there was a chess set, maybe there was a little bit of Irish cut and so on. And we played no less than anybody else plays, okay? And like one kid had a soccer ball, one kid had this, and we played. And today, go into my children's homes and I see like what the kids have today. I remember my own kids when they were small. Like at the end of the day, I used to take there was a closet at one end of the room. I used to open up the door to the closet, and I would take a shovel and shovel all the toys back into the closet. It was like come on, like it's like a toy store, and the poor kids are confused all the time. What am I going to play with now? What am I going to play with now? But I'm really against it. You know why? Because basically you're not leaving much up to the children's imagination. You're not giving the kids an opportunity to actually have to be creative. Yeah, we used to play. You probably did also with chestnuts. We used to take chestnuts, make a hole in it, put it on a string, and then the game was you'd hold out your chestnut, and then the other guy would flip their chestnut and try to crack your chestnut. Or we used to put buttons on a string and spin them. It was like you figured out things like what you could do with something and so on. Or like, have you ever seen kids like put 3 coins on a table and play like a kind of a game, like shoving the coins around and so on, right? But today it's like like the world is such that You mean to say you didn't bring me an Xbox? I don't even, like you didn't, right? So what the children really want is they want the taste of the infinite. There's a family here in Eretz Yisrael, and she's a Ger Tzedekis. She's a righteous convert. And I first met them in 1989. She was just going to get married, and I said to her, I said, please explain to me. I really want to understand, why are you converting? I wanted to understand it, because in Montreal, the only converts that I had come across were basically people who had converted because they were in a relationship with a Jewish person, and the family insisted that they convert at that time. And I really wanted to understand, because I saw that this lady is really serious. And by the way, there's lots of Gerim in Meishar, in case you didn't know. And she said to me that when she was a girl of 6 years old, now she went up to her father, and her father was that kind of guy. They lived in some hick town in Florida. And he and his friends, the way they would spend their weekends was, they'd buy, two cases of, two big cases of beer, and they would drink beer and tinker with the car engine, fixing this, adjusting this. And she says she went up to her father one day and she said, "Daddy, tell me about infinity." And he said, "Little girl, there ain't no such thing." And she said she ran away crying. She said she started crying right away, and she ran away from him. Anyway, when she was 18, she was taking the trip, and she was in India. She met some girls from the States, some Jewish girls, and they were on their way back to the States, and she was also basically going on her way back. And they said, "You know what, we're stopping off in Israel. Would you like to come back with us to Israel, and then we'll continue to the States?" And she said, "Sure, why not?" And she says she came to the cont'd, and as soon as she came to the cont'd, she knew she found infinity. She found what she'd been looking for all those years. And she stayed, and she was Megayer, and she has a family with 6 children, etc. I haven't seen them in years, but it's a very, very special person. Right, so Shlomo says children are looking for infinity. They're coming into this world. They're coming into this world, and they're saying, "Wait a minute, is this what it's all about?" I'm coming from a much higher place, right? I told you the story that Shlomo said he was giving a concert somewhere once, and there was a family with 2 children there, a 3-year-old and also a baby. And at the intermission, they come over. He said there was something very special there. At the intermission, they come over and they say, "We got to tell you the story." And she tells him that when she was going to go to the hospital to give birth to the baby, the 3-year-old said, "Promise me that when you bring my brother home, I can be the first one to talk to him." So the parents said, "Okay." They come home with the baby in the carrier, and he says, "Okay, I want to talk to my brother." So they put the carrier on the floor in the nursery, and he says, "I want to talk to him alone." So they had one of those Fisher-Price intercoms, and they go out of the room, and he goes over to his little baby brother, and he says, "I'm beginning to forget what it's like upstairs. Can you please remind me?" Huh? Cool, huh? And talk about Bereshis. There's another amazing story that I once heard from Reb Shlomo. He was on a plane flying somewhere to give a concert or whatever, and sitting next to him was this Gentile who was a very special guy, and they got into a conversation. And he tells Shlomo that he belongs to a group of about another 60, 70 families, that they had broken away from their church, And they started their own congregation because they wanted to really pray. They wanted to really live a spiritual life. And Shlomo says he was like a very special man. So the plane is about to land, and so Shlomo just thought to himself, okay, I'd like to share something with this person. So he had an Ishbishu Sefer on his lap, and he just opens it up and he looks at whatever Ishbishu said on that page, and this is what he says there. There's a whole Sefer of Zohar called the Tikkun Zohar, and it starts. It asks the question, why does the Torah have to say the word Bereshit? Bereshit bara Elokim. It would be enough to say God created heaven and earth. And anybody's going to say, Chaya, when did he do it? You're going to say, in the beginning, right? When else, right? So what do you need the word Bereshit for? So apparently the whole Tikkun Zohar was 70 lessons just on that question. Okay? So this verse gives the following explanation. He says, Bereshit bara Elokim, God created the beginning. And he put the beginning into the creation. What does that mean? So Reb Shlomo gives an example. Sometimes you're in a pretty lousy mood. You go for a walk in nature. What happens after a few minutes? You start feeling better. But nothing changed. All you did was that you went for a walk. So why do you feel better? Because you go out there in nature, and God put the energy of beginning into nature. And sometimes it's a koach of hitchadshut, a power of renewal that God put into the creation. And then the plane landed, and they said goodbye, and they took off. A couple of years later, Shlomo's somewhere in the same region, doing the concert, and he sees there's a couple there with a couple of children. Something again, he notices something very special. They come over to him during intermission, and the lady says, I don't know if you remember my husband, but a couple of years ago, he met you on an airplane, and you shared with him a teaching from a rabbi who lived 150 years ago. Someone remembered immediately. And she says, I want you to know that teaching saved his life. Because she says, at the time he met my husband, he was a multimillionaire. And then things took a turn for the worse. He lost all his money, and he couldn't face it. And he decided that he's going to end his life. Really. And he's a very organized man. So he had it all planned out. He took care of everything, and Wednesday night on such and such a date at 7:30 is when he's going to do it. Well, he finished all he had to do in his office, at his desk. It was 7:25. He had 5 minutes to kill. I mean, he was a yakka type of, like he wasn't going to. 7:30 appointments are 7:30 appointments. You don't do it before. You don't do it at 7:25, right? And being that he was always a religious man, he had a Bible on his desk. So he figured, okay, let's just have one more look in the Bible. And he flipped open the lid, the cover, and staring in his face was Bereshit bara Elokim in English. In the beginning, God created, and what came back to him was the teaching that Reb Shlomo said, God put the beginning into the creation. He closed the Bible, he went down to his wife, and he says, I met a rabbi in the plane a few months ago who shared a teaching with me from a rabbi who lived 150 years ago about starting again. Will you help me start again? Okay. You understand? So we're talking about this is the idea of a taste of the infinite. This is what's meant by a taste of the infinite. In other words, right? The Rav Nachman says that what characterizes the Baal Tshuva? What characterizes the Baal Tshuva is that the Baal Tshuva is saying, Ana zamin lemeheve. I'm ready to become. I'm ready to be something that I wasn't yet. I'm ready to be better than I've been until now, right? That's voracious. Understand? That's I'm ready to begin again. Okay. So we're still on 144, I believe, right? So he says, children want a taste of the infinite. The Gemara says that, right? We learned this from Yaakov Avinu, that the Shekhinah is hovering over the head of a person who's sick. Why is that? So he says, because the person who's sick, he feels that he needs something infinite. He needs something beyond what he's got right now. אפשר רק להוציא מהפה דיבור אחד אחרי השני. When you're talking, you can only say one word at a time. Right? מתי ששומעים, when you're listening, אפשר לשמוע כל אחד אחרי השני. You can hear one sound after the other. Right? הרי הגמרא אומרת, the Gemara says, תחי קלי לא משתמע. Two voices cannot be heard at the same time. Sure, you hear two voices, but you can't listen clearly to each one at the same time, right? But when it comes to seeing, you can see a lot of things at once. Because the sense of sight is connected with the infinite. When do people cry? Page 145. מתי שמישהו נוגע באינסוף שלהם, בעיניים שלהם. I don't know if you ever had the experience. Did somebody ever look into your eyes and you started crying? Yeah? Right? And the Ramchal says, where on your body is the presence of your soul the most evident? Your eyes. In your eyes. Right? So in other words, eyes have this greater and deeper insight. When you really love somebody, where do you look at them? At their manicure, of course. Where do you look? You look in their eyes, right? לא באוזניים ולא בשום מקום אחר, like you don't look at their ears or any other, their nose, their forehead, or whatever. You look at their eyes. כי העיניים אין סוף, עיניים זה כל כך עמוק. Because the eyes are so much more related with the infinite. They're so much deeper. יש אנשים שמסתכלים על העיניים שלהם ורואים שטרות דולרים. There are people that you look at their eyes and what you see is dollar bills. יש אנשים שמסתכלים על העיניים שלהם ורואים את השכינה הקדושה. There are people, you look at their eyes and you see the Holy Shekhinah.
Say it in English, like the eye of the windows of the soul.
The windows of the soul, right? When we were signing up Nesach to go to Cheder when I was a little kid, so Judy, she said she wants to see the teachers first, who's going to be his teacher, and she didn't even talk to him. She just went to look at his eyes. She talked to him, but what I'm saying is, as soon as she saw his eyes, she said, "Okay, this guy can teach my children." And a friend of mine, who was a very spiritual guy, him and his two brothers. As a matter of fact, one of his brothers is like a big man at Eish Torah. And so this is back in Montreal, and his father got very, very, very sick and was nifter in a couple of days. And he contacted me and concerning the funeral arrangements. And so I told him there were two possibilities, like, the regular Paperman's was like the name of the place, and there was also the Chesed Shalemis. And being the kind of guy that he was, he really wanted something like, like that was like 100% traditional. But he was also concerned about how his relatives would react going to such a place. Because there's a machitza and this and that. So he said, you can meet Rabbi Greenwald and see what he, speak to him, ask him your questions. As it happens, Rabbi Greenwald was in the hospital. I went down to the hospital, and his father had just passed away. Anyway, so I called this Rabbi Greenwald from the Chesed Shalemis, and he was there, and he came up with the elevator, or came down with the elevator, whatever it was, and my friend took one look at him, and he says, "Can you please take care of my father?" Didn't ask him any questions. He was like, we had real concerns. Took one look at this man and just said, "Please take care of my father." And I asked him afterwards, I said, "You were going to ask all these questions." He says, "I didn't need to. I saw his eyes." I saw his eyes. You understand? You can sort of, like, once when I think when the Tzemach Tzedek was a little boy, he asked the Alter Rebbe, "Why did God give us two eyes? God could have created us with one eye. We would see just as well, right?" So he says, "So you're learning how to read. So do you know the difference between a sheen and a sin?" So he says, "Yeah, the sheen has a dot on the right side, the sin has a dot on the left side." So he says, "Okay, it's the same thing." He says, with the eyes. There are things that you have to look at with the right eye. There are things that you have to look at with the left eye. There are things that you have to look at critically, and there are things that you have to look at with love. And I know somebody who can tell if they're in a good space or if they're not in a good space because they can tell which eye they're looking with. Maybe yes, maybe no, but but you understand it's when you look at somebody, like, you ever hear the expression in English, "If looks could kill, I'd be dead"? Yeah, in other words, like, there are people who are like, or we have this whole thing about ayin hara, right? Ayin hara. There's a lot of power in the eyes. There's a tremendous amount of power in your eyes, and it's kedai to learn to be connected, so that you can actually heal people just by the way that you look at them. Does that sound very outlandish? Now I got a hechsher from a healer. Have a good day, cont'd. So we stopped on 145, right? Leah, where's the camera?